It is truly surreal to think that we've waited for over 2 years for the second season of Monarch Legacy of Monsters, especially because the previous season left us with such a blaring cliffhanger. So far it seems like the latest installment plans to build on the refreshing formula that made season 1 so successful, while presenting many new ways that will not only take the Monsterverse to a whole another level, but also define its future. If you remember, at the end of season 1, we saw how Lee Shaw sacrificed himself by staying behind in the Axis Mundi, with no definitive answer about his fate, just so the others can get home. On top of that, we also time jump to 2017 as Keiko, Cate and May show up in Skull Island, where Apex Cybernetics had set up a base, with Kong appearing at the very end. It does not take very long for the first episode of season 2 to address these storylines straight away, so without wasting another moment, let's discuss what happens in the latest episode of Monarch Legacy of Monsters season 2, because there is definitely a lot to unpack. Like I said, the episode 1 starts exactly where the finale of season 1 left off, with Cate, May, Kentaro, Tim, Keiko, Verdugo, Hiroshi, Brenda, and all the employees of Apex Cybernetics and Monarch just trying to flee Skull Island because the act of opening a portal to Axis Mundi has clearly annoyed Kong. While the main characters do manage to make it to the 2 choppers that have not been squashed by Kong, allowing them to leave the island, Kong does squash a bunch of unnamed Apex employees because they clearly don't have their plot armor on. Then, a few minutes later, we see Keiko wake up in an examination room where she is surrounded by masked scientists and doctors. Now, she is still dizzy, as her body is understandably getting accustomed to Earth's atmosphere after being in Axis Mundi for such a long time, but she rushes out to search for Hiroshi. When she finally manages to find an exit door and walks through it, we find out that Keiko is on a high-tech Monarch ship that has been parked a few miles off the coast of Skull Island. Following this, we see Hiroshi catching up with Keiko and telling her that this was her legacy, which is true, because if it were not for the work done by her, Lee and Billy, then none of this would have existed. In typical Monarch fashion, episode 1 then flashes back to 1957, during a time when Billy, Lee and Keiko took a trip to Santa Soledad, southern Chile, for work. We already know that in 1955, Keiko had introduced Billy to her son, Hiroshi, and since then he had agreed to raise him as his own. Then again, in 1959, Keiko went missing while looking for Mutos in Kazakhstan, and so far it seems like season 2 is using the period between 1957 and 1959 to show us what the trio was up to. Now, if you're wondering what is in Santa Soledad, that place is apparently crawling with sea monsters. But before they get to this titan, Keiko, Billy and Lee have to pass through the only village in that area, who are not very welcoming towards outsiders. In fact, this village gave a rather cult-like vibe, as the buildings were marked with a rather strange-looking sigil, and there was also a sacrificial altar right in the middle of what I think was the town square. When they enter the local bar, Billy spots what looks like a giant version of a horseshoe crab with a bluish tinge and immediately rushes in to take a picture of it. Naturally, he is met with hostility, but lucky for him, Lee can speak Spanish and is able to pacify Thomas, Augustine, Lucia and everyone in the pub, allowing them to walk out of there in one piece. However, the trio again go back to the bar in order to socialise and get a better look at the mini Muto once things had cooled down. When Billy spots a tattoo of a kraken consuming a brig on Thomas's arm, he immediately assumes that it was not just a tattoo, but a sign that a sea monster does exist in these parts. As they begin discussing if they should start exploring the island or just leave, Lucia approaches Billy, and under a guise of dancing with him, she essentially confirms the theory that there was indeed a sea deity that the villagers idolise as it brings them food on a regular basis. Well, that definitely explains why nobody has bothered to work during the day. Instead, they are all diligently drinking like fishes all the time. Lucia also mentions that the symbiotic relationship that the village shares with this creature is a huge secret, and that the locals would do just about anything to protect it. She also warns that because they see Billy and his friends as a threat to their god, they might even go as far as to kill them, and that is why Lucia advises Billy that he should leave with Keiko and Lee as soon as he can. Of course, that does not happen, and instead we see Keiko and Billy somehow convince Lucia that they would get out of her hair if she gave them even a tiny glimpse of this sea deity. As a result, Lucia takes them to a cave that is full of crude drawings of the same horseshoe crab, like creatures that Billy saw at the bar and that of a kraken. As Lucia says, the villagers apparently call it El Gran Dios del Mar, which pretty much translates to the great god of the sea. We then flash forward into the current timeline of the show, where Natalia Verdugo is naturally pissed at the fact that she has lost so much of her personnel and skills, both Tim and Brenda, for their inability to handle the Kong situation more responsibly. In Tim's defense, he mentions how they followed everything according to protocol when they were getting Cate, May and Keiko out from Axis Mundi, and initially Kong even gave Apex and Monarch a free pass, but then out of nowhere he went completely berserk and nobody knows why. We then see Tim and Verdugo go into a room to meet Keiko, Hiroshi, Mei, Cate and Kentaro in order to have a discussion about all that has been happening over the past few years. However, Keiko has only one question to ask, and that is when do they plan on getting Lee out of Axis Mundi. According to Verdugo, they could not do anything to extract Lee as all of their equipment that is needed to open a portal is currently on Skull Island, which is completely inaccessible because of Kong's hissy fit. Honestly, even if the Alpha Titan had stopped ravaging the place, there's a good chance that everything they owned is just damaged at this point. Of course, this upsets Keiko because Lee had spent more than half of his life simply searching for her, so it is tragic that she cannot do anything while knowing that he might be in danger. Now what's truly wild is just how thick of a plot armor Lee is wearing, because I really expected him to be a little battered or bruised from roaming around that hellscape full of weird creatures. But Axis Mundi got nothing on him. Bro does not even have a gun with him, and somehow he is playing Bear Grylls here. Anyway, sometime later, Kentaro tells Cate that she will be sent back to Tokyo, where Monarch will test and debrief her about her whole tryst with Axis Mundi, and after that she will be sent back home. Kentaro, on the other hand, is going to keep working with Hiroshi at Monarch, but Cate is not having it. She refuses to go back home without Lee, even if Kentaro believes that Lee was probably dead. But Cate does not want to give up searching for Lee until she is sure about Kentaro's theory. Well, we know that Cate is clearly onto something because Lee is indeed alive. She then reaches out to Hiroshi with her plan to get Lee out, and in response, he cites the regulations that states how Skull Island is out of bounds. Now, Cate knows just how much Hiroshi cares about Keiko and convinces him that she was going to rescue Lee for her. Of course, Hiroshi could no longer deflect this emotional manipulation, and so he also agrees to help Cate out on her mission. Meanwhile, we see Brenda paying a visit to Mei and telling her that if she wanted to work with her in order to prevent more such G-days in the future, she was more than welcome. Now, after Brenda had left the ship, Cate approached Mei with her plan to rescue Lee out of Axis Mundi, and of course she is more than happy to help Cate out. As a result, Mei keeps Tim busy in order to drift his attention away from the CCTV monitors, thus allowing Cate, Hiroshi and Kentaro to take one of the speedboats, open up the stern door and then make their escape. Eventually, we also see Mei catching up to them, following which all of them journey towards Skull Island. Now, after reaching the beach, Kentaro realizes that they have only 6 hours to get in and then get out before the storm wall around Skull Island closes in and makes it impossible for them to leave. Of course, that is not all, because on the route to the ravaged Apex Monarch facility, the group confront a pterosaur-like creature that can somehow shoot electricity out of its mouth, but they somehow avoid getting attacked by just hiding in the bushes. Eventually, when they get closer to their destination, the group finds Kong, who was sleeping and almost crushes Cate at one point. But after making sure that Kong was clueless about intruders entering his domain, the group resumed their journey. Meanwhile, during this time, Keiko wakes up, and after checking out the Monarch tech that allows them to spot where Kong was, she plans to use it in order to avoid him and get out to the Apex Monarch facility in order to bring back Lee. Unfortunately, Verdugo refuses to sign off on this mission, as she has already lost many employees, and in order to prove her point, she allows Keiko to see the footage of the amount of damage that Kong had done. Now, as she is looking at the footage, Keiko notices a creature that looks oddly similar to the same mutated horseshoe crab that she had seen at that pub in Santa Soledad, thus allowing her to draw the conclusion that the reason why Kong is losing it is because he believes that opening the portal would end up bringing that Kraken into Skull Island. However, that is still not enough reason for Verdugo to sanction such a dangerous mission that would take them directly to Kong's residence. But after she realizes that Cate, Hiroshi, Kentaro and Mei were all on a rescue mission to the Axis Mundi, she wastes absolutely no time in assembling a team with Keiko and Tim before boarding a chopper that would take them to Skull Island. Now, at this point, Hiroshi and Cate have already started working on the interdimensional pod and the orb that has the power to activate the portal, while Mei and Kentaro try to activate all the backup generators, which will be used to power the orb. However, after finally having some time with her father, who she had presumed to be dead, Cate directly confronts Hiroshi about his decision to have 2 families in 2 different countries. At this point, I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, Hiroshi would mention how Emiko was not his wife, or Kentaro was not his biological son, and just like Billy, maybe he was supporting them financially after seeing them go through difficult times at Monarch. However, that was just a load of bullshit I was feeding myself in the hope for redemption, because Hiroshi directly admits how he fell in love with Emiko and then raised Kentaro, while also having feelings for Caroline and loving Cate. Yes, life is indeed complicated, but I really don't know how to make sense of any of that, and sure, Hiroshi is a great scientist, but my man is not winning a Father of the Year award anytime soon. Anyway, ironically, during this ongoing family drama, we see Mei and Kentaro in the Apex Monarch facility trying to fight off a rat or lizard-like beast. Luckily, they do manage to successfully turn on the backup generators after killing the creature, and then reunite with Cate and Hiroshi. Now, as the group is wondering if they should go forward with their mission, we see Keiko, Verdugo, and Tim arrive at the facility. At this point, the fog around the island is getting unsettled as a storm is imminent, which means that they don't have long to rescue them. But when Cate sees the helicopters incoming, she initiates the portal by activating the orb and sending an interdimensional pod they escaped in back into Axis Mundi. Meanwhile, Lee is about to fight the same creature that Keiko wounded with an arrow in Season 1 when the portal reopens and sends the pod in. However, he wastes no time in reaching the pod, but then Lee realizes that he is no longer alone, as a number of small shell creatures began running towards the portal and crawl all over him as they do. Not just that, near this portal we see an extremely large sea creature who is disturbed by the beam, and yes, it is indeed Titan X, who we have all been waiting for. However, as expected, Lee successfully exits the portal via the pod, but the creatures also follow him. The beam also awakens Kong, who quickly rushes to the source of it in order to try and stop it. Now, to everyone's delight, as Lee comes through, Titan X, or should I say the Kraken, also enters the surface of the planet and begins waving its tentacles everywhere. In the chaos, Natalia Verduro is seemingly killed when she is struck by one of them, but nobody stops to check if she's alive or dead, because they get busy boarding the choppers and getting back to the ship for their own safety. During this time, when the group are on their way out of the island, they spot how Titan X managed to crawl its way to the sea as Kong chases after it from afar. Unfortunately, the Kraken-like creature escapes into the sea as Kong throws his arms up in frustration, only to then turn around and glare at the helicopter above, while locking eyes with a very guilty-looking Cate. Naturally, Kong is pissed at the humans as he now has to fight with this Titan X to establish his dominance, which sort of ruins all the downtime that he was enjoying. All I can say is, bringing back Lee should better be worth the trouble that is going to be caused from the impending mega fight that is being teased between Kong and Titan X. Having said that, the next episode will probably work further on establishing this sea creature as the big bad of the season, and even if Titan X is new to the Monsterverse, I am sure it will be making quite an impact that could end up getting both Godzilla and Kong to team up once again. But the next episode will surely centre around Natalia Verdugo's death, which was not something I was prepared for. It really is a shame that killed off the only remotely good person in a shady no-good organisation. However, with Keiko back on Earth, there might just be a possibility of her working with Tim on the future of Monarch to bring her original vision back to life. I am also excited to see an emotionally cathartic reunion between Lee and Keiko, but more than that, I am excited to see how Kentaro confronts Hiroshi about the two separate households he has been running at two different points of the world. There is also Cate, who will clearly be guilt-ridden from her mission, and not only causing Verdugo's death, but now Titan X is also loose on the world, and considering this creature has a history dating back to at least the 1950s, he will surely be a monster to be trifled with. In fact, I have a feeling Titan X may be ancient, and that is exactly what makes Kong worried. Do you expect a near-world ending showdown in the future of Season 2? Let us know about your thoughts and theories in the comment box below, and thanks very much for watching.